He fought like brave men should fight, and he died the way honorable men should die. Rahimahullah. We pray for his soul to be accepted by Almighty Allah as a martyr, alive in the heavens, and he deserves that. Second, during the whole year of terror, war crimes, and genocide in Palestine and today in Lebanon, it has become without any shred of doubt that Zionism is a racist, colonial, ethno-supremacist ideology that wages a war against humanity. It is not only the enemy of Palestine and Palestinians, poses a threat against the world peace, and forms a laboratory of oppressive technologies and mass spying tools. It is time now for humanity as a whole to acknowledge this. To acknowledge this reality and to impose a total boycott on Zionism as an ideology that provided the basis for horrific war crimes, and the way to achieve this should be a main focus in our discussion in this conference. Third, it has been proven against and again that all forms of resistance against the Zionist aggression on all fronts forms one of the highest manifestations of just war, a righteous war for justice and freedom in the face of the terror and tyranny of Zionist colonization. For all this history, Western colonization has stood for nothing but for quest of gold and the lust to satisfy material urges. It came to the South with tyranny of wealth and might, while the people of the South had to stand for their rights and freedom, for justice, as a main rule that should govern global politics. And you have come through all that. Today, the Palestinian resistance embodies the struggle for humanity. What makes us humans is our intellect that should guide us to distinguish what is right and just, and our sincere hearts that should lead us to stand for these highest values, no matter what the price might be. Today, the Palestinian resistance leads us to the path to restore the true meaning of humanity. It is leading our way in a struggle for civilization, not in a clash of civilizations. Demonizing the noble resistance and trying to stigmatize it with terrorism is a stain of human conscience. As it stands up today in front of a criminal genocide war, the Palestinian resistance deserves all kinds of support and solidarity. And all the attempts to besiege it or to isolate it, it must be opposed and thwarted. Fourth, as a nation who once led the way of this noble human struggle, South Africa took the initiative to stand against this criminal genocide war and brought it to the International Court of Justice, and brought the Zionist occupation to the room of court in a rare incident despite Israel's rich record, as we thank South Africa today for this initiative and deeply appreciate its human, moral, political stand. We believe that this initiative is a promising starting point that should be continued, and we should build on that. Fifth, based on the above, allow me to put forward the three following initiatives for discussion in this conference and Mahrajaan and in your all work in South Africa. Number one, it is time to take the stand against Zionism as a racist, ethno-supremacist colonial ideology a step further by adopting a unanimous document of total boycott and isolation, acknowledging the nature of Zionism as a threat to humanity and world peace. We should work to take measures which can isolate this regime and put it away from the world peace, as it provides the ideological basis for some of the worst crimes committed in human history, and as a source of never-ending aggression, and as a global laboratory of oppression. In this document, we suggest that all the signing political parties and NGOs will vote to complete a boycott on Zionism and Zionist state and all its institutions, be it political, economic, or cultural boycott, until this ideology is globally isolated, and at the same time to extend hands of communication, support, and solidarity to the noble Palestinian resistance. Number two, I further suggest to build on that with a wide-reaching parliamentary initiatives across the global South to legislate new laws that impose total boycott on Zionism and the Zionist state and all forms of settlements as well, while enforcing laws that could empower all forms of resistance on all fronts at the political, financial, and cultural and academic fronts. Number three, the United States has for long been imposing the monopoly of the dollar in the global economy and is using this monopoly to blacklist, freeze, and confiscate funds worldwide in an act of piracy and theft. It is time now to stand against this piracy. It is time now to stand for this piracy. America is not capable to give behavior certificates for the world while they are involved in this genocide and war crimes. And to start Global People's Economic Forum to explore the possibilities and establish the practices that could put an end to the monopoly of US dollar. And it is possible. And to start direct exchange in local currencies. We are seeing this happening. We should not stand only for talking. We should walk the talk. We should start taking initiatives and measures that isolate regime, the colonial regime Israel. Thank you so much.
So, thank you very much. Shukran to Dr. Ayman from the International Quds office in Turkey, Istanbul. We will now proceed to the second sector. At this point, I want to thank the leadership and our VIP guests for their inputs and the comments now. And we'll proceed now to the first sector of the conference, the religious sector. Call upon Dr. Rashid Omar. We have Rabbi Stephen Friedman online, and we will have Pastor Rian de Villiers to join us in front, please. And also Dr. Saoud Mahfoud. Shukran jazilan. Our moderator for this session will be Sheikh Ihsan Talib. He will continue then to oversee this session. And we will run to, we are a bit late, but we'll try to catch up.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, Mulweni. Thank you, Mr. MC Sheikh Shahid Isu. We are starting with our first religious sector segment panel of the Freedom for Palestine conference. I wish to perhaps just remind everyone that we are running exceptionally late. So we're going to see what we're going to be able to achieve in terms of gaining time. And of course, we're also having a panelist online. So that'll be Professor Stephen Friedman, as Sheikh Shahid had indicated. And then, of course, we have our three panelists in person here. And so I think we're going to try and limit the time of our speakers. Originally, this was supposed to take place over 1.5 hours. So we are going to now be forced to make it stick to 1 hour. And so that means, with the greatest amount of respect, if we're going to have each panelist taking 15 minutes, is going to already take us to 1 hour. And if it is therefore at all possible that we do our presentations in a 10 to 12 minute limited time slot, and then thereafter also allow some time for questions and answers. And so for me, then, the responsibility would be to introduce firstly our panelists as they will be presenting. And I also welcome Dr. Abu Mahfouz, who is also present here, and we do not have him as his profile on the program. I trust that all of you are able to have access to the program. It is as far as I understand, an electronic one. And so all the other speakers are relatively well-known and established as South African citizens, but I will do the duty as and when their turns arise to introduce each and every one of them. If I have the cooperation of our technical team, may we start with Professor Stephen Friedman. He is ready and rearing to go. Professor Stephen Friedman is a research professor in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Johannesburg. He has published several studies of South Africa's transition to democracy, and his current work focuses on the theory and practice of democracy. He is the author of several books, numerous chapters, and journal articles. His most recent book, Good Jew, Bad Jew, Racism, Anti-Semitism, and the Assault on Meaning, discusses the use of ostensibly anti-racist language to justify racism. He is also a media commentator on the development of South African democracy and the author of the weekly column for subscribers, Against the Tide. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Professor Stephen Friedman and request humbly if he could contain his presentation between 10 and 12 minutes. Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Friedman. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to participate, although regrettably I can only do this online because it's a busy time of the Jewish year, and it wasn't possible to get to Cape Town for this particular event. It should be clear from the introduction that I'm not a rabbi, although I do preach and I do teach Judaism at a congregation. There was once talk that I might become a rabbi, but then they discovered my views on Palestine and they withdrew the offer. So it's as somebody who practices the Jewish religion and observes the Jewish religion that I'm speaking to you today, but also, of course, as you heard from the introduction, as a scholar and academic who tries to understand how human beings can be free. And it's that context that I want to suggest to you, we've heard from the introductory speeches that the object of this conference is to talk about how Palestine can be free. That one of the factors, not the main factor, but a factor in the struggle to free Palestine is the fact that there is an increasing gap between the Jewish religion and what the Zionists are doing in Palestine. Now, the Zionists like to present themselves, of course, as the representatives of the Jewish people. They are the real Jewish people, as far as they are concerned. But actually, the truth is entirely the opposite. Not only are they not the real Jewish people, but they've actually turned their back on what it is meant to be Jewish for thousands of years. And if you look at the writings of the Zionists who planted the ideas which led to the creation of the state, which is now causing so much pain to Palestinians and others in the region, you will see that they didn't very much like Jews. The Zionists really wanted to be white Europeans, and they were worried that the Jews were not like white Europeans. And they thought that if they could build a state on historic Palestine, that would make them white Europeans. And of course, they've succeeded in that, because we see that white Europeans support everything that the Zionists do. They support all the war crimes, they support all the horrors which are visited on the Palestinian people. But what they did not do is keep alive the tradition of Jewish teaching and Jewish living, which they said was a waste of time. They said Jews had spent centuries studying the word of God when they should have been out there with guns and bombs fighting other people. They said that Jews had wasted their time keeping their faith alive when they should have been building a state. And if you look at much of what the Zionist state does, they take the most bloodthirsty bits of interpretations of Jewish tradition in order to justify their deeds, but they do not practice the traditions of Judaism which many of us were brought up in and which have been alive for a long time. So it's, first of all, a mistake to see the Zionists as people who represent the Jewish tradition. Secondly, and following on from that, if you study the Jewish religion, it is possible to interpret that religion, as some of us do, as a religion which denounces Zionism, as a religion which points up to the moral crisis which Zionism has created. I was fortunate some years ago to be invited to a conference in Bethlehem by the Diyar Center. And the Diyar Center is a Palestine Christian liberation theology center, which tries to look at how Palestinian Christians can contribute to the liberation of the Palestinian people. And in that paper, I argued that you could take the Hebrew Bible, and the Hebrew Bible is divided by Jews into 52 portions, each one of which is read on a day of on the Sabbath during the year. You could take every one of those portions of the Jewish scripture, and you could find an anti-Zionist message in them if you looked for it. And my paper was designed to show what those anti-Zionist messages were. So that means potentially that the fact that you are Jewish does not mean that you have to support what the Zionists are doing. Now, this may sound good in theory, but what we've seen over the last year, which I think is potentially a very important development, is that this message that Zionism is not what Jews should be supporting, that it's not consistent with our tradition, that it's not who we are, that this message is becoming much more popular around the world than it ever was. And we're seeing a very important trend today. We're seeing, up until not that long ago, most Jews who rejected Zionism simply dropped out of being Jewish. They simply didn't want to be identified with being Jewish because they were so horrified with what Zionism was doing. Now we see the opposite trend. We see people saying, I am Jewish, and because I am Jewish, I want nothing to do with what the Zionists are doing. So that if you look at the United States, for example, the protests on the campuses which were angry at what the Zionists were doing and the violence of Zionism, that many of those Jews who participated in that process were people who observed the Jewish religion. So you had this wonderful experience that people talk about, in which Jews and Muslims and Christians were gathered in this protest movement and observed each other's rituals and participated in each other's expressions of their religion in order to make the point that, as some of the speakers have told us already this morning, support for Palestine is a duty of humanity. It's not restricted to one particular group in humanity. And if you go to Britain, for example, you're seeing people hold Jewish religious services which are really anti-Zionist, which are devoted to denouncing Zionism. And this is going to grow because what we're seeing now is that important thinkers who try to think about how the Jewish religion should develop, that these thinkers are beginning to talk about how we need to cleanse Judaism of Zionism. We need a Judaism which has nothing to do with Zionism, which gets rid of all the evil which Zionism has enforced on our tradition and implanted on our tradition, so that we do not have to see the horror of people who are destroying Gaza, pretending to be observing Jewish tradition. And we're going to see a lot more of this over the next while or so. We're going to see a lot more of Jews saying, this is not what I am, and this is not what they are. In a wonderful protest in America, which you may see, a group of a dozen or more rabbis insisted on being committing civil disobedience, on being arrested in protest at the violence which the Americans were doing to the people of Palestine. And we're going to see more of this in the future. Now, if we're looking at strategies to liberate Palestine, I'm not suggesting that what is happening among Jews is the most important issue that we need to consider. But I think that it is an issue which is important to consider. And besides the fact that it is always important to have voices speaking the truth, voices saying this is not being done in the Jewish tradition, that the horror which is being inflicted on Palestine is actually opposed to the Jewish tradition. While it is important in its own right to have that, I think there's a very important strategic issue here for those who are concerned about the future of Palestine. And the issue is this. If we were to suggest that one way to free Palestine was to convince Jewish Israelis that what they are doing is evil, you would be laughed at, and rightly so. Because just as in our South African experience, white South Africans were not interested in changing their ways until they were forced by pressure to change their ways, so Jewish Israelis will not change their ways until there is pressure on them to change their ways. But remember also that there are millions of Jewish people living all around the world who do not have a stake in oppressing the Palestinian people. And the point that I always make is that if you live in Europe or America or other countries we could describe, and you are Jewish, you do not depend on the Israeli state for anything. One of the most laughable claims of the Israeli state is that it makes Jewish people safer. This is ridiculous. The state of Israel is the most dangerous place for Jewish people anywhere in the world. Jewish people are much safer in any other country than they are in the state which is oppressing Palestinian people and provoking the violence of the oppressed people. So the point is that there are many Jews around the world whose support for the Zionist state is greatly exaggerated, and who may well be open to political campaigns explaining to them that being a proud Jewish person does not mean having to be a Zionist. So because my time is up, and I do want to respect the chair's desire to keep time, my parting message is that to stress once again that Jews who are horrified by Zionism, who are disgusted by Zionism, are becoming a much more important trend in Jewish life, that you're going to be hearing those voices more and more, that I would suggest very strongly that those voices can be an important help going forward, not in historic Palestine itself, but in the other countries of the world, in our just attempt not only to free Judaism from the horror of Zionism, but to free the Palestinian people and the people of Levant from what has been imposed upon them. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Friedman, for those insightful presentations on the importance of interfaith solidarity for justice in Palestine, and of course, speaking particularly from the perspective of the Jewish community. Justice in Palestine. And of course, speaking particularly from the perspective of the, without any further ado, we will then move on to our next presenter, who will be Dr. Rashid. Beyond violent extremism and avoiding harm, a Muslim response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
My assignment, this was not my topic. I'm going to be very straitjacketed and read through my presentation to important to affirm that Islam like Christianity, Judaism, intellectual and social social vitality is fostered through what I call jihad. Al-Afkar. In light of the above, the view conflict, this lens of settler colonialism is important. In this regard, it is instructive to note that Islam frequently addresses the iniquity and the evil of those who are unjustly drive people from their lands. So there is many times in the Quran mentioned الَّذِينَ justly drive people from their lands. So there is many times in the Quran يُقَاتِلُكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ وَلَمْ يُخْرِجُوكُمْ مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ أَنْ تَبَرُّوهُمْ وَتُقْسِطُوا إِلَيْهِمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Either wish to إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. Either wish to إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. Either wish to part of the jihad. These are important part of the strategies. And in the South African struggle, our war was not won on the military battle. Our war was won because of this comprehensive struggle of jihad, and that is very, very, very critical. The current situation in Gaza is a human catastrophe, marked by loss of life on an industrial scale, destruction of infrastructure, and immense human suffering. And the pain and the secondary trauma that we have must not overwhelm us in terms of losing our strategy and tactics in the combat of fighting Zionism. As believers in a compassionate and just God, Ar-Rahman, we cannot remain silent in the face of such horror and immense human suffering. However, as conscientious Muslims, as responsible global citizens, our response must be guided by hikmah, by wisdom, and by an Islamic ethical moral commitment to justice, not only for Muslims, but for each and every citizen of the world. We must therefore reject and hold on to our humanity at this time, narratives that demonize entire peoples or religions, and instead advocate for solutions respecting the rights and dignity of all. And that is why it was so moving to have Professor Steve Friedman witnessing as a practicing Jew that Zionism, in fact, is a distortion of true Judaism. We must not sink into anti-Semitism, although we know that anti-Semitism is being weaponized by the Zionists in order to demonize us. So this includes a ceasefire, calling for a ceasefire, lifting the blockade on Gaza, and demanding accountability for human rights violations. Let me then go to my fifth and last point. This again may be a very contentious point, but this is a conference and we are involved in Jihadul Afkar, so I welcome your critical feedback on this. I would like to share this concept of peace building, Bina'us Salam, a peace building process that I advocate for Palestine is not about establishing a so-called Islamic state, but rather a state grounded in adl, in qist, in justice, karamatul insan, human dignity, and equality for all, especially minority communities. And here I would like to reference the 14th century scholar Ibn Taymiyyah, Taqiyuddin Ibn Taymiyyah, who died in the year 1328 of the Common Era. Interestingly, Ibn Taymiyyah argues that an Islamic state is a just state. He posited that a just Islamic state is one committed especially to economic justice, the eradication of poverty and the huge inequalities in wealth. In our country here in South Africa, we are suffering from this in post-apartheid South Africa and across the world, where workers receive fair wages and economic monopolies are eradicated. That is an Islamic state. Ibn Taymiyyah posited that a state practicing justice, adl and qist, is preferable to a pious tyranny, even if that state is ruled by Muslims. And this is in fact what we are witnessing today, of all the major countries in the world ruled by Muslims, but there's no adl and there is no qist. Additionally, addressing the legacy of settler colonialism and seeking redress for historical injustices must be integral to the peace-building agenda for a future one state, a single state, Islamic state. This peace-building vision resonates with the theological principles outlined, especially in this very important document called Kairos Palestine. Kairos Palestine was formulated by Christian theologians, liberation theologians in Palestine, adopted by them, and advocates for a state based on equality, justice, liberty, and respect for pluralism, rather than being dominated by one particular religion. In conclusion, the struggle for justice and peace building in Palestine is not only a political and a humanitarian issue, but it is a profoundly ethical and spiritual one. In this context, the Islamic tradition offers a rich array of resources on how to confront dhulm, oppression, and build a just society. Spaces such as this conference for dialogue and critical reflection are essential for cultivating a nuanced and a more contextually relevant understanding of Islam in the establishment of justice and peace building. In advocating for justice and peace in Palestine, Muslims justice and peace building. In advocating for justice and peace in Palestine, Muslims are called upon to embody the highest principles of our faith, striving for a world Muslims are called upon to embody the highest principles of our faith.
لا مشاحة في المصطلحات. We don't have disputes about terminologies. It's
to embody the highest principles of our faith.
لا مشاحة في المصطلحات. We don't have disputes about terminologies. It's we don't have disputes about terminologies. It's about the essence that we have as human beings towards this particular question. We will now hand over and move on to our next Catholicism. Sermons. Chair, is that Catholicism or it
much for the opportunity. Thank you, Sheikh Hisham. I greet you. I said I did my study on Bayers Nodia's Heidelberg Catechism. Now, the Heidelberg Catechism is a Reformation document. So right through history, the church has come to points of struggle. 500 years ago, the Reformation happened where they said back to the Word, because what the church is doing is not according to the Word. And there was a movement, and when a movement like that happens, a document comes to life in which we want to put our faith and express our faith. The same happened here in South Africa when the struggle was at the height of, and it was seen that some members of the church were not opposing it. Some members of the church, like the Dutch Reformed Church, were actually supporting it. A document was born here in 1986 called the Bella Confession, which helps us to again understand who is this God of justice and compassion, because we get distorted living in the systems and the structures. The Apostle Paul, who writes in the New Testament, says that our struggle is not against flesh and blood. We must remember that. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the systems and the structures that are used to, and where people are incorporated in, and which are used to dominate and destroy others. And those are, which people are caught up in, those are the systems that we need to challenge and break down and resist. I am also standing in the tradition of Archbishop Tutu, which also ministered here most of his life, who led the church in the church struggle against apartheid, and who also called for ways of non-violent resistance. When I read the Bible, and the time we are in has become also a time for the church to reflect again on what they believe. There is the Palestinian pastor, Reverend Munter Isaac, who has become also prominent in the past, and even before that, where he also did his study, or his doctoral study on Zionism and the church, and he wrote a book called The Church on the Other Side of the Wall. And that's really an important book to read in the church context, and I believe that Munter is also bringing us to a place in the church's history again, where we need to discern where we are. The Reverend Alan Busak says that it's a time of discernment. We need to discern. He's leading the church in decolonization, because I think the next movement that we are in is the church is being decolonized. And we are reminded that we are part of a community of justice. The Apostle Paul also writes that when one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. Therefore, the suffering, the genocide that is happening right in front of our eyes, it is also part of our suffering. These are our brothers and sisters. Therefore, we cannot look away. The gospel is quite clear that there is just no way that any of this can be supported in any way from a biblical basis. There's no way that you can be a Christian and support Zionism. It doesn't exist. There is no thing as a Christian Zionist. It is a made-up term. It doesn't exist because, well, it exists. It's there, people, but it's not validated by the Bible. You cannot take it from there. I mean, even Jesus himself says that to harm one of these little children, for a person who does that, it is better to put a large stone around his neck and to just sink away in the deepest ocean. So we're looking at the absolute suffering, trauma, murdering of children. There's nothing in the gospel that can support this. We visited Palestine in December. And I just wanted to maybe share some of the testimonies of the people that we experienced there. First of all, I must remind us that on my question that I was asked to speak on was religious freedom and sacred spaces in the occupied territories. So I want to take you to an article that was released by the World Council of Churches and speaks about a threat. Let me just get that, sorry. It says in June 2022 already, the World Council of Churches issues a statement. During the past 7 months, the local heads of churches have issued no fewer than 7 statements highlighting the threats posed to the attacks of extremist groups against clergy and church premises, Israeli limitations on freedom of religion and access to holy sites, and other actions that threaten the status quo and the multi-religious and multicultural identity of Jerusalem. And then they go on to list many statements and in ways in which people are prohibited from living out their faith and where freedom of religion is prohibited. So I'm going to try and go through this quickly. We visited Palestine and we met with many people. The first group that we met as we arrived was with the Armenian youth. And we went to the Armenian quarter. And when we got there, we found a group of young people, mostly under 25, who has built structures to trying to protect their property, the Armenian quarter, where more than 500 families are situated, from an Israeli businessman who has come with bulldozers and want to take the place over. There was also a struggle in the church because the church leaders sold out, in a certain sense, to the regime. And the young people stood up and they said, no, we are not going to, our leaders are not leading us, so we need to take the leadership. So that's the first thing that encouraged me on that first day when we got there, is these young people coming together, going out to work, and then coming back in the afternoon to wait at the space and guard it and other people, and just helping each other in this way. They were also, 2 days after we left, they were attacked as well by Zionists and settlers that came to them. We also met with, let's get that, with the Imam from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We went to his house, Sheikh Ikrima Sabri, and we were so much hospitality received in his with his family and friends, and we spoke there, and he told us about his struggle as well. We wanted to visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but it was guarded. We couldn't go in. And he was saying, and we met him 2 days after he was released from being arrested, and because he's occasionally arrested every 6 months or so, and then held without charge. And then he said that they arrested him and said to him that he incites violence against the Israeli state because he incites young people to stand up. And then he said to us, well, I say to them, young people are not allowed to come to the mosque, so how can I incite them if I'm preaching and they're not there? And it is the Israeli state that comes in and makes video recordings of him and then challenges him afterwards and constantly stops him from visiting other places. When we were in Jerusalem, we met with Orthodox Christians, just young people, Christians living everyday lives, saying that they are stopped on the streets. Their phones are being taken from them. If they find anything on there that is in support of family members in Gaza or wherever, then they get arrested and taken in. They were telling us, while we were there, we met Archbishop Attila Hanna, and he was saying us how clergy are being spat on in the streets, how some of these places are being attacked, how specific sacred sites like the upper room for Christians where is seen where Jesus and his disciples met together, closed in a closed room, and that became a very special site for Christians also. It has been constantly blocked off and cordoned off, and there's excavations happening, so Christians are not able to go there. When it's festivals in Jerusalem, the people allowed, the Christians allowed to come to Jerusalem are being restricted more and more and more every year. There is certain places where it is said that crosses are not being, cannot be displayed during Easter, for instance, in Jerusalem, because it's offensive to Zionists. These are the testimonies that we get. So it is clear, being there, coming from South Africa, also when you live in a situation that has happened like that, you can read the underlying signs of racism and domination and how it works. And it is quite clear to see that the system has been created where you've got people who are seen as humans and the rest is just less humans. We met with Palestinian Christian human rights journalist, and I'm not going to say a name because there was also the fear of being persecuted. And I just want to read maybe something that she said. She says the following, and it's her testimony. It is not like Israel started to detain people on 7 October. Detention is something that has come to shape every single detail of every single Palestinian family for decades. And I ask you to think what that means for Palestinians, that all our human rights work has failed to release one single detainee. Honestly, my only consoling idea is that we need to bear witness. So this is what Scholastic Mukasonga, who writes about genocide in Rwanda, who was in Paris when 37 of her family members were killed in Rwandan genocide. And she spoke at the time and she says she lives with the struggle of, what do I do? What is my job now? I feel like my notebook is a cemetery for all the people I've lost. And she bears witness, and bearing witness is also bearing a burden. I want to believe that we are creating the testimonies, the stories, the evidence, the documents, the names, the lists, especially challenging Israel's attempt to destroy all, because this is also a war on our memory, individual and collective. When Israel destroys the biggest archive in Gaza, when Israel destroys the biggest community cultural center in Gaza, razes graveyards, and also destroys a complete entire history, one of the oldest mosques in Palestine, and all the archaeological sites, that is also a war on our memory. You can fight this war on memory by unforgetting, by recording and remembering, with the hopes that perhaps these details will one day serve to indict one Israeli war criminal. Perhaps these details will bear witness to what Palestinians went through, and it is probably not now, but maybe along the years, maybe one day, we need to fight towards a future where all war criminals are held accountable, regardless of their identity, and where justice is not just the privilege of a few, but for all. So with that words of our sister in Palestine calling out to us, may we hear that, may we as a church, but also as a broader community of justice, because that is what we are called into. May we continue to raise our voices for freedom, equality, justice, restitution, restoration from the river to the sea. Thank you.
We say thank you to Reverend Rian de Villiers for that impassionate presentation, and we thank him for reminding us about our common humanity despite religion. And when I say religion, I don't mean our adherence to a particular faith, but we talk about power structures, and that of course our struggle is against power systems and power structures, and not against, as you quote from the gospel, the flesh of human beings. And so there's much food for thought in there. Our time is, of course, is of the essence. I'm not going to say is our enemy. And so we are going to haste immediately to our last presenter, Dr. Abu Mahfouz, who has been visiting South Africa over the number of years since the first time I remember with Maulana Ihsan Hendricks, whose memory has also been brought to life again here by our brother Dr. Ayman. And of course, that was the first time we met with Dr. Abu Mahfouz. He has since afterwards visited South Africa once or twice again, but he travels the world as an ambassador for peace, for the people of Palestine, as well as a social justice activist. He's a historian, I know, of note, and his research and PhD studies is about the sacred lands as well, and history of the sacred lands. I call upon Dr. Abu Mahfouz to address our gathering.
السلام عليكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بصراحة كمسلم أنا أنظر للمسجد الأقصى أو لفلسطين باعتبارها القضية والأولوية والأبجدية والأرشيف والرسالة والأجندة. In brief, المسجد الأقصى is the certificate of Islam in Jerusalem. It has about 33 Islamic priorities. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the holy night of Al-Isra wal Mahraj, after returning from the heavens, he prayed on the right side of the holy rock inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa as Imam for 25 messengers of Allah, including Isa alayhi salam, Musa, Ibrahim, Nuh, Adam, and the rest, and 1,024 prophets. The Imam was Muhammad, and means it is his property. It is Darul Islam, the land of Islam. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa means for us, and the night of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj means that this ummah, the nation of Muhammad, must carry the flag of equality and peace to all humanity. Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj means that this ummah, the ummah of the nation of justice and humanity and peace, should take role and rule over this holy place in order to spread complete equality among all. Now, for all Muslims around the world, Jerusalem is above any differentiations, above any competition. They are all united on this just issue. On the other side, Netanyahu works day and night to build a collective opinion among Zionists, supported by 55 rabbis and mass media and false politicians to embark on a new Middle East regime in which Muslims are slaves, Christians are expelled from the Holy Land, and Zionists work to be the masters of the area. Believe me, in the year 1800, Muslims were only 70 million, and the Jews in general were only 13 million. In the year 1900, Muslims became 270 million people, and the Jews were still about 13 million. In the year 2000 AD, Muslims became 1.5 million Muslims, and the Jews jumps to 14 million. Nowadays, the Jews are about 15 million, but Muslims are 2 milliards and 1/3. 2 milliards and 1/3 of a milliard. And you know that numbers are motivated and يعني Netanyahu can't يعني humiliate such a great ummah, which is about 1/4 of the world. Not all Jews are with Netanyahu. Not all Judaism are with support Netanyahu conspiracies. If they want peace, peace should sprinkle out and spread out and flash out from Jerusalem itself. But Netanyahu and Biden, and you can say Trump, want to يعني drop Orushalayim by parachute on the holy site of Jerusalem. They want to build, Dr. Ayman, they want to build a Jewish state and a Jewish capital, and to get rid of Arabs of all kinds, either Christians or Muslims together. And this couldn't be. I will tell you, and you all already know, that in the war 1970 and the 1967, Arabs were either Christians or Muslims, were about 70,000. But now they are about 500,000. Instead of the cruel details of Judaizing and Israelizing and changing the statutes inside Jerusalem. At last, Gaza alone. In Gaza alone in 1948, there were only 150,000. Now in Gaza we have 2.3 million people. And they will never be victims to the weapons of Netanyahu. Netanyahu's cruel plans explode barrels of anger inside Gaza. Gazans, the people of Gaza, waited 75 long years for the Arab solution, for the UN solution, but in vain. And they began working strategically to change their children, to educate their children, to prepare strategically, to recite the Holy Quran. Most of them are engineers inside Gaza, although it is no more than a can of sardines, very small. There are about 62,000 engineers and 42 reciters of the Holy Quran. The strategic thing is the woman. The woman is deeply changed in Gaza. They invest in humans, especially in women. And you know, in Arabia, the woman is the basic of the family. So everything is changed now. The moments, the children suckle patience from the breast of their women. They gave a masterpiece of patience under the bombing of F-35 and F-16 American fighters. The struggle now is between right and false, black and white, between peace and aggression. But I will tell you that this peace in Gaza are the most educated slice in Arabia. They are deeply educated, highly qualified. And you know, the educated is the first one who rebels, and the last who surrender. The educated is a different kind of people. In the last year, in this year, they mourn. They suffer. They complain. They are wailing deeply. Without food, without water, without medicine, without clothes, nothing except bombing. But they never surrender. This year, is as long as 1 century. And the struggle in this year is much better than a long century. They are living in their homeland. And these Zionists came from 112 countries just to dominate on Palestine and Jerusalem. We are not against Jews. Jews, Christians, and Muslims. All Jews, Christians, and Muslims are the legal owners of Palestine during centuries. But now, it is Zionism, the leftist extremism in America that rules over the Congress, who want to get rid of peace, of humanity, of equality inside the Holy Land. What is the conclusion? Nowadays, all liberals around the world are united. United in heart, united in slogans, united in demonstrations and activities. For the first time in life, 19,000 demonstrations embarked out in Europe and in America. This is the first time in history. And the Zionism project is shaken strongly at the hands of these refugees inside Gaza. Now Palestine became the address and the iconic address for all seekers for peace around the world. It is the essence of a beauty, and it is the center of the world. Madinatul Jalali wal Jamal. The city, Jerusalem, is the city of nobleness and beauty. And it talents all liberals around the world. Frankly, future is smiling for the people of Jerusalem and Palestine. Future will be for us. We are seekers of freedom, of liberty, of equality, of dignity, of life. But the people of Gaza are seeking for medicine, for air to smell, for genocide to stop, seeking to get rid of killing day and night, of massacres. People of South Africa, I am very happy to visit you and to stay this hour with you. No east, no west. South Africa is the best. South Africa is the enemy of aggression, of discrimination, of oppression, of tyranny. South Africa, to us in Arabia, in Palestine, in Gaza, is the symbol of a freedom. Your cheerings here, either Jews, Christians, or Muslim in Cape Town, is deeply hurt in Amman, in Jordan, in Jerusalem, in Arab area. We see your activities. We are proud of you, your government, your role in Holanda, in the international laws your lawyers, your enthusiasm, your jealous. Only South Africa support Gaza faithfully. You are samples, good samples of humanity. We'll never forget your role. We'll never forget your support. Please keep on supporting these targeted refugees and victims of Netanyahu. Long live South Africa. Long live its people. Long live. Thank you.
We say thank you very much to Dr. Saoud Abu Mahfouz. I don't think we could have a more fitting end to the first sector of the religious panel of the Freedom for Palestine Mahrajaan here this morning. I have to apologize to everybody else here though. Our time is completely up. I am not going to allow the opportunity for questions or comments to be made. There is the Friday prayers, of course, in front of us, but an entire panel must first still also be presented and deliberate before the Friday prayers. I wish to thank each and every one of our four panelists. First and foremost, Professor Stephen Friedman, Dr. Professor Rashid Omar, our beloved friend, Dr. Dominique, Reverend Rian de Villiers, and of course our Ustad, Dr. Saoud Abu Mahfouz. Allah bless you all abundantly, and thank you very much for your contribution here. And everybody else, let's thank them appropriately.
Our time is slightly delayed at the moment because of a late start. I would like to ask the participants that we have a short break. There will be a tea coffee break at the back, but please make it only for 10 minutes. By 1:15, we'd like to start the second sector, which is the diplomatic and government sector response to the genocide in Palestine. The beverages and the snacks are at the back of the hall. Please proceed immediately. Those members that are participating that needs to register, can you kindly come on this side of the screen? Then we can register those members and you can have your name tag, please. All the other members, please proceed back and you can enjoy some snacks and some beverages. Thank you very much.
I'm going to connect his laptop so long.
Okay, it's
He's third up.
Marco. I'm
Marco.
Faslin. I'm the moderator of the panel.
nice.
So you have a presentation?
Yes,
Okay.
but I'm the third anyway, so.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. So show me the time, how much time it has. Is it on the screen?
No, it's not, but I'll manage.
Okay.
So
So
don't
I think
worry.
it's a good idea.
Yes, it would have been a good idea actually, yeah. So that you could
I don't know
see
what's shown here actually then.
it. I think you
Camera?
see yourself,
Okay.
or you might see you. I'm not sure.
Picking up now. Go extended screen.
I'm just gonna mute my thingy.
And
Present mode.
okay, I'm just going to check now. Sorted out now, no?